Destigmatize Mental Health Podcast, Season 4, Episode 7, Understanding Teenage Anxiety with Sophia Vale Galano. Sophia, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Of course. No problem. I'm excited to have you on. I'm excited to be able to go ahead and talk about teenage anxiety. Definitely a population that I have worked with and that I currently work with at this time. So it's cool to go ahead, and I'm super proud of the project that you've been doing.
Thank
Before we
you.
even get started, Sophia, where can people find you?
So my website, Sophia, www.sophiagalano.com, and also on the socials on Instagram, Sophia Vale _Galano. Those are the best ways to get in contact with me.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Again, it's a pleasure to have you. I'll be real with you. Someone reached out on your behalf, and I always get like spam emails. And then your publicist reached out to me, and it looked pretty spammy, but then somehow it didn't.
Felt a little legit. Legitimate spam.
Yeah, it was no, but see it, then it's not spam anymore. So then I
Sure.
was like, man, why does this look legit? And it just everything looked like it did look clean. I'm like, man, this is so then I checked the email. The email looked legit, but I've also gotten legit emails that are,
Right.
that have a domain that aren't real. So I'm like, man, I went through the BBS, I looked for your license, I went through your Instagram, and I
Okay,
felt like
you
a
did your
stalker.
research. I
Yeah,
like it.
I like the way that you rephrased it. I felt like a stalker. You call it research.
Research. It's all, it's all how we look at things, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It's all about perspective, right?
Totally. That could be a subject for the next podcast, for the next episode, right? Changing your perspective on things.
Reframing, cognitive reframing.
Exactly. That's the therapist way of looking at it. I like it.
Yeah, for sure. But I definitely want to go ahead and give you praise for this book. Is this a first project that you've done with where there's a book?
Yes, this is my first book, Calming Teenage Anxiety. So I'm very excited to talk about it. And, my hope with the book is for people to just, gain skills from it and really benefit from reading the book and, hopefully help people out there and help them feel more confident navigating this, tough, tough concern and tough issue that's very prevalent and on the rise.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Hmm.
I got a copy from your publicist, from a digital copy of it, and I started reading. I mean, I blew through it. Honestly, it was
Oh,
great. It was such a good read,
I'm so glad.
and
Thank
I don't even have
you.
kids, so it was a great read.
Thank
And a lot
you.
of the questions that I'm going to go ahead and ask you are based off of the book itself. So I'm super excited.
Fantastic.
Again, the book is called Calming Teenage Anxiety. It's a topic that hits near and dear to my heart. I work with a transition age youth population that are in the foster care system. Um, as I stated in your introduction, you write that when you have hosted a discussion for parents of teenage anxiety, you were pretty amazed at how parents were seeking guidance for their teens.
Yes, exactly. Hmm.
Tell me a little bit
Exactly.
more about that. I mean, what's some of the
Yeah.
feedback that you've gotten?
Yeah. So, right now, so I have a private practice. I've had a private practice for over 10 years. I've worked with teens in a variety of different settings. And, I mentioned this in the book that, in conjunction with working in private practice, the other settings, I would go to schools and give talks. And, either the school counselor, we would pick a subject, and invite the parents to come. And, we did subjects such as, depression, substance use, we kind of mix it up. And I remember the talks that I would give on teenage anxiety were always the most crowded. The parents had so many questions. I remember being really amazed and blown away about this topic, how parents really did not know what to do. And they really just wanted tools and practical guidance and ways to really help their teens. And also, there was a lot of confusion around anxiety of what's normal, quote unquote normal. I don't love that word, but what's normal, what's concerning, where should parents kind of pause and reflect? When is it sort of standard teenage behavior? Just so much confusion around it and navigating teenage anxiety in this world that was very different than what most parents experience in their own adolescence. Like the world is a completely different place. There's social media, there's technology, and then we have all these kind of classic factors contributing to anxiety. So that was really my goal for the book, is to help parents really understand what to do and what to say, what not to say, what not to do. And my hope is for someone to pick up the book and feel more confident again and say, like, hey, okay, I think I can try this. I think this is something that I can actually do right away. I don't need to study this for years and years. I can go right now and do this. I can help a teen that's struggling. I can engage in even a preventative care conversation if the teen isn't struggling. So there are a lot in there. And my hope too for the book is for all types of parents. So I wrote it to be very accessible. And I'm glad it was such a compliment when you said that you kind of blew through it, because I want it to be an easy read. I think there's a lot of kind of dense books out there, which are great, but things that, feel accessible for parents who are overwhelmed and maybe intimidated by the
Yeah,
subject.
absolutely. Yeah, it was
Hmm.
like 200 pages, but honestly, they like that. And trust,
I love it.
I'm not a fan of reading. If I'm being very honest, I think this is probably the first book that I've picked up since by choice after graduate school.
I am so complimented. Seriously, that means a lot.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
happy to hear that you enjoyed it.
no, for sure, for sure. But to write an entire book just because of the fact that people started asking questions. So, at the end of I do a lot of presentations and I'll always ask, like, do you guys have any questions? And it's a dead, I don't get shit. So then, people, I'm like, all right, well, I guess my presentation must have sucked.
Just
So,
no, or you're just really good. See, there we go, reframing again, that you just answered all their questions. That must be it.
nah, see, you get motivated to go ahead and write a whole ass book. I'm just kind of here, just diddle daddling, but yeah,
It
to
was a
to be
lot of
fair, I
fun.
haven't gotten invited back, so I don't know. We'll see what happens.
So maybe we gotta reassess. Yes, but you know what? I will say it was really fun for me to write this book, and all of what was in the book was drawn from experience. So it was drawn from case studies of what I saw in my private practice, working in schools, working in treatment centers, and just noticing a lot of similarities and patterns that just kept arising. And that's why I was like, let's put this on paper and really to provide kind of this guide and sort of blueprint, kind of like an overview for people to just, you know, again, I know I keep repeating this, but really just to feel more confident navigating something that, again, there's just so many questions around. And I feel like there's a lot of conversations, a lot of dialogue around teen anxiety, that it's people saying it's so bad, it's so prevalent, or it's so common, it's on the rise. And we kind of know that, but then what do we do? And that's really what I hope for this, is more tools, more skills.
As a you'd say, facts.
Hmm. Yep,
Yeah. So,
exactly.
I'm I'm gonna and again, I read this book and I started doing questions. So the questions, again, I'm not gonna spoil anything for anyone, but I
Mhm.
am gonna go ahead and reference chapters. So please, definitely for those listening, again, I do encourage you, find it on Amazon. It's fairly inexpensive, and I feel like it's gonna be a return investment, just being able to go ahead and read this.
Oh, thank
Right off the
you.
back, chapter 1, you discuss how anxiety can manifest in adolescence in a way that is often overlooked. How can
Mhm.
parents or guardians determine if a teen is struggling with anxiety or simply it's a natural hormonal change, or if it's just a change in age? Because
Totally.
or, some parents will go ahead and say, or even clinicians will say, "Oh, that's just a normal part of, adolescent
Right.
development."
Right, right. And a lot of my work with parents also is normalizing this confusion too, because oftentimes it's the most concerned, loving, caring parents that, will overlook this, and oftentimes parents are very hard on themselves if, let's say, they have brushed a teenager's anxiety to the side, because it is very easy to confuse this. And what I usually recommend is for parents to evaluate really how often a teen is anxious and to what extent. So, I kind of pose this example, it's a very kind of simple example, obviously there's more layers to this, but, I kind of just in a nutshell is like, let's say there's a teenager that's, nervous before a test, they're feeling panicky, they're feeling overwhelmed, they're feeling stressed about it, but they go, they take the test, they get through it, they move on with their day. Okay. pretty standard, maybe not a great cause for concern, something we're going to be mindful of. Whereas, let's say the teenager who throws up before their test, before has a full blown panic attack before the test, the teenager who refuses to go to school because of the test, the teenager whose grades are slipping in other classes because they're so nervous about this test, or it's impacting their social life. Like that's when we're going to want to take a closer look and also evaluating how often that is happening. Is that really something that happens once in a blue moon, maybe like once a year? Okay, maybe it's an off day. Is it something that happens once a week, multiple times a week, multiple times a month? That's when we're really going to want to assess and just take a closer look here, and that's where I encourage parents to just approach this with more of a curious, inquisitive mentality of seeking to really learn more here, because again, it is oftentimes very much, behind the scenes and it might not seem as overt as we would hope.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've had the pleasure and at times the headache of working with teens. It's
That's a great way to describe it. Pleasure and headache, yes.
yeah, no, absolutely. It's it's a real complex time, as our listeners know, and I have to continue to educate myself on basic things such as lingo. However,
Mhm.
most don't get that opportunity.
Mhm.
But your
Mhm.
book dedicates a chapter to the impacts of cultural and social change and
Yes.
what you reference as the Gen Z effect. What factors unique to this generation contribute to making current teen anxiety so alarming and severe?
Mhm. Right, right. So, a number of different factors. I talk about kind of the academic stress, collegiate competition, but, some really major factors that, are important for us to look at are really, the impact of social media and technology. And this is an area that's really confusing and complicated for many parents, again, because most parents of teenagers today didn't experience that in their own adolescence. So, again, a lot of my work is really helping inform parents of what, that looks like and helping parents develop more empathy for their teenagers of what, adolescence is like with those added factors of how that can amplify or increase or cause anxiety in teenagers, and I pose a lot of exercises in the book to help parents gain more empathy in terms of self-reflection of just even envisioning, their own adolescence and then imagining it's all kind of broadcast over the internet and just a constant kind of comparison trap and just kind of judgment all around and just for parents to remember that we have these kind of newer cultural concepts in addition to all the classic causes contributing to anxiety too, so there's just like compounded layer after layer here that oftentimes is not just one factor that's causing a teen to be anxious. There's lots of different factors here.
Right, for sure.
Hmm.
I think it's interesting that you bring up the notion of being able to go ahead and take other people into consideration, as well as being able to go ahead and learn empathy. Because what I tell my clients,
Hmm.
is that empathy is something that isn't that you're not born with. It's something that you learn throughout time,
Sure.
and empathy is also learned by people judging you or giving you some sort of feedback, even when it comes
Hmm.
down to topics that they may not necessarily have any idea or notion about. Right? For me, I could definitely be empathetic not having a child myself
Hmm.
and still
Hmm.
be on the same page where I could go ahead and be like, "Hey, I know exactly what your teenager is feeling, and you probably do too because you probably
Yes.
lived that at some point."
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And most parents that, pick up this book, they are caring and concerned parents and they want to help, and let me put it this way, it never hurts to enhance the empathy, even if the empathy is already there, it never hurts to enhance it even more and just to gain a better understanding of really what it is like for teens today and again navigating the world that they're living in.
For sure. Yeah, because it is a very complicated world. It's a
Mhm.
world, again, where, I tell a lot of my clients, like, I'm able to go find fentanyl in 10 minutes, where
Right.
I'm at.
Right.
And, if an individual if I'm able to go ahead and find that as an adult, it's so much easier for a teenager to go ahead and find it. They'll be able to go ahead and do it
Right.
within 5 minutes.
Right.
And,
Right. Mhm.
that's just a simple example of it, but there are so many external factors that come into play. So again, empathy is going to be a really important key
Mhm.
because most of
Mhm.
these kids, uh, that they, if they're looking for fentanyl or they're looking for cannabis or looking for alcohol, that's usually a response to a symptom. It's not because
Right.
of the fact that they really want to go ahead and do it.
Right, right. Definitely, 100%. I appreciate you saying that. And, and when I work with teens with, substance use disorders and working with the parents, also a lot of that is educating the parents about that piece too. That again, there's more that's going on behind the scenes here and underneath the surface too, that it is all, it's a symptom of something bigger here. And at the same time, like we benefit from practical tools and skills to address the symptoms.
Absolutely. We read extensively about the comparison trap that's
Mhm.
caused by social media. How can parents facilitate a healthy conversation about social media to shift a teen's focus away from judging themselves against the highlight reels of others? And
Right.
I ask this because I can argue that not all social medias are bad.
Yes, yes, and I feel really strongly about that as well. So I come from the stance, and not saying this is the correct stance, the only stance, but as a therapist, I really do not believe in restricting a teen's social media use or prohibiting them from using technology or going on Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat. I actually think that can really backfire. And what we want is for teens to actually feel safe talking to their parents, not that they have to sneak or lie or deceive. So really, I come from this place of encouraging, parents to have a conversation with their teenagers about modifying how they use social media. So having a conversation that entails maybe, you know, how do you feel when you see X, Y, and Z on social media? How do you feel when you look at this versus this? And encouraging teenagers to shift how they're using social media, perhaps involving the mute button, the restrict button, the block button, of can they kind of edit things down, and can they also, sprinkle in more positive pages on social media too, following positive pages. I mean, most 16-year-olds are not going to, I mean, maybe some, but most are like, I want to follow my friends. I want to follow, this influencer, this famous person, not like I'm going to go on social media just to follow, pages with positive quotes. At the same time, for parents to really encourage their teen, hey, if you are going to go on social media, can we integrate some of that in there? How do you think that would feel? Could we try it out? See see how you feel after trying that for a week. See how you feel after you try muting this person for a month, and kind of having this conversation with a team that's more collaborative versus a parent saying, no, you can't use this, or you can't follow that person, or you can only be on social media for 10 minutes a day, of treating the teenager more like an adult and having these conversations around social media.
Right. And I think that there were some parents, well, at least with the conversations that I've had, is that these conversations are going to look different if you're 12 or 13
Yes.
in comparison to 16 or 17.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like these are gonna be
Definitely.
100% different conversations.
Yes.
At 12,
Yes.
13, and within your early teen years,
Hmm.
maybe social media isn't even a topic of conversation because of
Hmm.
how heavy we know social media to go ahead and be. And of course, every house is gonna go ahead and be different, right?
Totally. Totally.
Ensure ensuring that there is a healthy supervision if if you are 10, 11, 12 years old and you have, that account being monitored by an adult and
Mhm,
being able to
mhm.
go ahead and, that could be a conversation because
Yeah,
there are very young influencers nowadays.
right.
And when you're 14, 15, 16, those conversations are going to be different. And I agree being able to go ahead and treat them as adults because I
Mhm,
mean, they are learning. And of
right.
course, I mean, I think I would be lying if I were to say, "Oh, I don't put my youth on check." I put them on check, and I'm like,
Mhm.
you don't know shit.
Yeah,
You know what you think that you know. You
right,
know what you
right,
see, but you don't know
right,
anything.
right.
And
Mhm,
then that's gonna go ahead and come in life. And,
mhm,
of course, whenever things do hit the fan and you're able to go ahead and say, "Well," you know, instead of saying, "I told you so,"
mhm. You can
it's
think
just
it.
you could I stay thinking that.
Right.
But the reality is that it's not telling them, "I told you so." it's not about being right or wrong or winning or
Totally.
anything. No, it's about just being there and listening and
Yes.
being able to go
Yes.
ahead and be present
Yes.
when, because that I don't know how you feel about cursing, Sophia, and so I apologize.
No,
I'm
I curse all the time. You're fine.
cool. All right, cool. This is the platform of my podcast.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah, and I won't put this on the reels, right? But, to give you positive publicity. But the reality is that these kids will always fuck up.
Yeah. Of
They stay
course.
fucking up, and that's just within their programming, their nature. That's just by
Yeah. That's what they
that that
do. They're
that
teenagers. Yeah.
exactly. With
Yes.
it's not even a I always tell my parents that are present, it's not about if it's when they fuck up. And when they
Mhm.
do,
Mhm.
it's not a competition, it's not letting them know, "Oh, like, hey, I told you so." No,
Yes.
screw that.
Yes.
Push that away,
Totally.
push that
Totally.
vocabulary, and show up for them as a parent should.
100%. 100%. And it's okay. Again, we kind of joke about it. I think it's okay for parents to think that to themselves, because like most chances, most times they are right, but do we need to say that to the teen? No. What does that do except cause further divide and makes the teen feel, that they can't I I also don't really like this word, but kind of make mistakes or fuck up, it's like more of parents reframing it as like lessons and opportunities for growth and knowing that they're going to figure it out. And that's, something that I get into kind of later in the book, as well as, for parents not to rescue teens from making mistakes and not always kind of just like jumping in and saying like, let me save you, and just to, obviously preface, this is obviously there are certain situations where it is appropriate for parents to really intervene. Obviously there's, an emergency or a crisis, suicidality, severe substance use, obviously different story for the sake of this conversation, talking kind of more general anxiety here. But for parents to really, again, like you said, just be present and just show up and meet the teen where they're at, and none of that I told you so, like I'm right, you're wrong. Again, even if the parent is thinking it, which is
Because
okay.
that is only going to exacerbate their anxiety.
Exactly.
That's only gonna go ahead because again, regardless of whether you look at it from a theorist perspective or a practical
Mhm.
perspective,
Mhm.
or a realistic perspective, a parent should be showing up for their kids. That's why you had a kid.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when you don't or you tell them, "I told you so," their anxiety is gonna go off the roof.
Yeah, yeah, because it doesn't provide a safe platform for them to learn, and so much of anxiety is about this fear of the unknown, a fear of doing something wrong, fear of something bad happening. And, for teens, when they feel that their parents are going to support them, even if they take a risk or they do something and it doesn't work out, the anxiety is going to be lessened when they feel that they have the support there, which is, why the book, I try to come from this place of very non-judgmental and, compassionate for parents while still encouraging parents to really mindfully self-reflect of, what language do I use with my teenager? What's my tone with my teenager? What's my overall energy? It's always helpful for us to look into that.
Exactly. Right now, this is the years, and of course, we as clinicians, we will say, "Hey, most of these individuals, their frontal lobes will develop at between the ages of 25, 26. So during
Mhm.
this time, it's
Yep,
again showing those examples that they'll be able to go ahead and utilize in future generations and be able
totally.
to go ahead and break some of the taboos, some of the stigmas that come
Totally.
associated with anxiety and normalizing it because we all deal with anxiety.
Right, right, totally. And there are certain levels of, feeling anxious that are, doesn't have to be bad. Sometimes that's actually like an opportunity again for growth, of like, oh, this is outside of my comfort zone. I'm going to push past this. It's good for me. But again, where do we draw the line? When is it, kind of life altering? When is it preventing us from moving forward? And again, this is where it can be very confusing for parents, that oftentimes it's not taken as seriously as maybe it could be. Because, some parents are like, okay, well, it's natural for my teen to feel anxious or to feel nervous, and that's kind of part of the deal. But again, that's why I go back to that how often and to what extent.
Yeah. And if you do want to make fun of your teen wait till they turn 24, 25 and bring it
Yeah.
up because at that point
Yeah.
they've already learned about anxiety.
Right, right, exactly, or just make fun of them in your mind, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
That's healthy.
Yep, absolutely. It's involved
Yes,
for it,
100%, and just take note of all of it, so, just document it, write it down, so when they're older, you have lots of material to use.
for sure. Love it. Love it. Beyond the social and cultural pressures, you cover the biological influences. As a social worker, we believe in person and environment and heavily focus on the biopsychosocial model.
Right,
Why
right.
do you advise parents that a physical exam is essential for addressing anxiety effectively? And what message does a teen's anxiety send when it co occurs with a chemical imbalance or a genetic influence?
Right, right. Well, and this is also, oftentimes this is disregarded too by very well-meaning parents. I mean, how would they know this? Again, I think a lot of people, unless they've worked in mental health or worked in the medical field, why would they think, oh, it would be good for me to go get, my teenager kind of checked out by their doctor, get a physical. But, oftentimes, I'm not a medical doctor myself, so I will also say that out of my scope, but oftentimes there are other factors that are contributing to the anxiety that are more physiological. Like there's an underlying medical condition, there is a hormonal imbalance or chemical changes, and without really addressing that or without ruling that out, we can't really treat the anxiety as effectively. And oftentimes there are people. I have many adult clients in my practice who will say, I struggled with anxiety and depression, for years. And it wasn't until I turned 30 that I went for my physical and I found out I've had an underlying thyroid condition for my entire life that, influenced my anxiety or, made me really lethargic. And I thought I was depressed, but it was really just it was imbalanced. So it is important to really consult with a physician to just make sure that there's nothing else going on here, because then we also have all those other added influences too. So just ruling that out is really, really important. And I encourage parents not to overlook piece.
In your book, you also call self worth the ultimate weapon in combating anxiety. For the majority of adolescents, why does any form of hardship become a direct reflection of their self worth? And how can parents help pivot towards self acceptance?
Yeah. Oh, great question. I love it. And this is, maybe that social work background of really emphasizing the resilience factor and how important that is for our self-worth. So when a teen has higher self-worth, believes in themselves, it's easier to navigate anxiety. So let's take that example of the test, of the teen that, let's say, is really anxious before taking their test. Even though the anxiety is there, they're able to say to themselves, okay, I'm really scared. I'm really freaked out. Am I going to get through this? I'm terrified. I'm spiraling. And I also know that even if I completely bomb this test, it doesn't mean that I'm worthless. It doesn't mean that I'm no good. It means that I'm okay. I'm still willing to kind of get through this. And I know that I'm going to bounce back. I know that I'm resilient versus a teen who, let's say, has lower self worth, has the anxiety, it's even harder to get through it because then the spiraling thoughts can really escalate of, okay, well, I'm going to bomb this test and then it means I'm completely worthless. I'm a bad student. I'm no good. And then what does that do for their anxiety? First of all, then it mixes in a little bit of that, anxiety's best friend, the depression, and then also it amplifies the anxiety when they're going into other, kind of threatening, quote unquote, threatening situations, other times where, they have to walk through fear too, and walking through fear and developing that resilience is so good for our self-esteem. It's so good for our confidence to see like, hey, I can make it through hardships. I'm strong. Like I can get through this. And oftentimes, teens really struggle with their self-worth. It is a really challenging time in their life for so many different reasons. But this is where, I have this conversation with parents of developing self-worth also means that they have to take a step back and not rescue, and allow teenagers, I would say, to kind of metaphorically, scrape their knees a little bit. We don't want the teenager to metaphorically break their knees, but it's okay to scrape
Right.
their knees. That builds the self-worth, but it can be very challenging for parents to do that. It kind of goes against natural instincts of parents not to, kind of rescue of like, oh my gosh, you're so scared, you're freaked out, let me help you, it can be helpful in the right situation to take a step back.
Absolutely. There
Mhm.
are and I'm not a fan of this trend, but I found it very interesting from the lens of a social worker. There's a trend that was happening fairly recently in which parents would go ahead and put their baby close to a wall and they would thump their hand on the wall as if the child got hit, and then they would give a reaction. And then the child would cry naturally.
Mhm. Mhm. Sure.
That creates anxiety for the child,
Right.
but on top of that, there's also a positive lens from that,
Mhm.
if you were to go ahead and look at it, the way that the parent shows up for the child, um,
Mhm.
it that is the way that the child is gonna go ahead and react.
Mm.
So in that situation, in that trend, the parent is nervous, therefore the child is gonna go ahead and be nervous and cry at the
Right.
same time.
Right.
If they were to go
Totally.
if they were to go ahead and thump
Mhm.
and move on or not react,
Mhm.
the child anxiety wouldn't be as present.
Totally. So fascinating, isn't it?
Right, but that doesn't take away from the fact that anxiety shouldn't exist in an individual's life because anxiety
Right.
is a good thing, and it can be a good thing.
Right. Right. Definitely. Like, and I talk to clients about this all the time, whether they're a teen or an adult, that it's good again to walk through fear, and it's good to push ourselves outside of our comfort zone. Again, obviously, like there is a threshold and there's a limit of, when is it too outside of our comfort zone that it's unsafe, that it's a hindrance. But it's good for us to say, hey, this was scary, still safe, but scary. And I was able to get through it. That helps people feel strong and feel confident and feel proud of themselves. And that example that you gave with, the baby and the parent, I mean, it's so fascinating because that's where, I come from this stance of having parents really look into their own anxieties too, in a very, again, non-judgmental way. But, could the team be picking up on any of the parents' anxieties here? And for parents to remember that teens are not expert communicators at all. The teen rarely is going to say, well, I'm anxious because mother, you are anxious as well, and I'm internalizing that. I mean, who knows? Maybe there's a teen that will say that, but they're not going to say that. So it's also important for parents to remember that just because it's not being said doesn't mean that it's not happening.
Absolutely. You make a clear distinction between unhealthy restrictions and healthy boundaries.
Hmm.
How
Hmm.
does letting go of restrictions and embracing boundaries enhance a teen's self-worth and independence?
Yes. Well, and this is a really tricky topic. I think out of all the topics that I discuss with parents, this one is often understandably very hard to grasp here, because parents who are strict are usually coming from a place of care. And they're coming from a place of love and they want to protect their teen. So, when I work with the teen, it's also important for the teen to understand that most times the parents are coming from a loving place. It just maybe is not being delivered in a way that resonates with the teen. Restricting, unfortunately, and again, of course, there's emergency scenarios, but for the purpose of this conversation, restricting again backfires because the teen feels that they're being treated more like a child, where the parent is telling them what to do, what not to do. It teaches the teen that the parent's not really a safe person that they can talk to about it. The teen feels more controlled. The teen wants to start feeling more like a young adult. Boundaries treat the teen more like a young adult, but still provide a good safety net for the teen to fall back on, and boundaries are really healthy, whereas restrictions are again controlling. So, an example I would say with a boundary versus a restriction is, like even if we go back to that social media example of you can't use social media, like I'm going to take away your phone, you're not allowed to go on social media at all. It's bad for you. Okay, I'm taking away the phone. Versus a boundary is like, okay, well, let's have a discussion. You're failing a lot of your classes and it's not appropriate for you to be using social media as much at night, and let's have a conversation about what that might look like. Or, if you're failing all your classes, maybe we're going to limit for a certain amount of time that you're not on social media. It's different. But it's easy to confuse the two. There are some overlaps here, but boundaries are important. They treat the teen like a young adult. Restrictions treat the teen more like a child.
Yeah. No, that's fair. You offer examples of unhelpful relating and advising parents to rescue their teens from mistakes. How can parents frame mistakes as lessons and opportunities for growth to build resilience and strength instead of dependence and victimization?
Yeah. This kind of goes back to what you were saying before, even with that example you gave earlier, which is, that it's important for teens to learn that they can survive and when they make a mistake. And I often say that there really are no mistakes. We learn from them, and that's why it is an opportunity for growth. And it's healthy to let our teens make mistakes again, unless there's an emergency situation. We want the teen to say, well, I learned from this experience, so I'm not going to do it again. And oftentimes what will happen again is these, very concerned, loving parents, like let's say we use this like academics, a parent might kind of intervene or try to rescue and say, oh, my kid is getting you know, a C in this class. I want him to get an A. I'm going to email the teacher and ask for an extension or extra credit opportunities. What does that teach the teen? It teaches the teen that the parent's going to bail them out. It doesn't teach the teen like, oh, I need to study harder if I want to get better grades. So it's really, I really feel that it's crucial for parents to refrain from rescuing again, unless it's an emergency situation, unless it's a crisis or unless the teen is like outwardly asking for some sort of support, and this is a later conversation, but if let's say the teen is like, hey, I'm really struggling. I want to go to therapy or I want to get counseling, this is opportunity for a parent to say, okay, yes, let me help you find a therapist or let's talk about it. But again, rescuing ultimately I feel does a disservice to teens. And again, for parents just to be very mindful of, do I fall into that pattern of rescuing? Is it hard for me not to rescue because I care so much? And reframing that, taking a step back actually is a caring action in the appropriate setting and situation.
Allowing your youth to fail is one of
Yeah.
the best things that a parent could do
Yeah. It's
because they will
hard.
it's hard. It's
So
hard.
hard.
And you
Hmm.
even when you see it happening, let them fail.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know that they're gonna fail. You know that this is gonna be the worst idea probably in human history,
Right.
in that
Right.
moment.
Right, right. And of course, if it's like a safety issue, of course, intervene, if the kid is, really a danger or, getting involved in something that's like illegal or, really harmful, sure, of course. But, when it is like you see, a lot of parents are like, oh, I don't like my teen dating that person, you know, that person's going to break their heart. I'm not going to let them date now. Again, what is that doing? Like, so yeah, I think there are ways that, this can be implemented, kind of on a day to day for parents and their teens.
Right, and again, going back to boundaries, being able to understand boundaries,
Right.
I look at when I do my conversations on boundaries, I always focus on, well, there's 6 different types of boundaries, and then there's the 3 types of boundaries. So, there's porous, healthy, and rigid, and then the 6
Mhm.
styles of boundary kinda goes into the physical, mental, emotional,
Mm.
sexual, spiritual, financial. So,
Mhm.
if
Mhm.
there's a violation within those boundaries and you're a parent and you see that some of these boundaries could cause your youth a bunch of anxiety, let it happen.
Yeah.
Just let it
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, this is where it's also important for parents to get their own support with this too, because oftentimes, parents can logically understand this, but implementing it is very difficult. And again, it's understandable. It's natural for this to be a really, really tough area.
100% different when you're in it versus
Right.
when right, for sure.
Totally. Totally.
In chapter 5, goal expectations and conveyed messages, you guide parents to examine their own word choices, their tones, their overall energy.
Mhm.
When an empathetic teen absorbs a parent's anxious energy, what message does that convey? And why is processing the parent's own anxieties necessary in order to support
Mhm.
their particular teenager?
Right, right. And to preface, and it kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier, is that most teens are not going to outwardly verbalize this, and they might not even be aware that it's happening, which is that, teens, they model themselves after their parents, whether they like it or not, and they're witnessing what's going on with their parents. So, if there is a particularly anxious parent, that can, subconsciously kind of send this message to the teen that, okay, it's natural to be anxious. It's okay to be anxious. And this is kind of a baseline, or this is standard, or, if you're not anxious, but I'm anxious, like maybe that's abnormal. So it is really important for parents. And I talk to parents about this piece a lot, particularly when they have a teenager that's resistant to getting help, which is for the parent to modify and change themselves is actually a very empowering action parents can take because it requires no collaboration from the teen themselves. So, of really having the parent look into themselves as, oh, am I anxious? Is my teen seeing me anxious all the time? Is my teen seeing me stressed and running around all the time? Does the teen see me set my own boundaries with people? Does my teen see me say yes to things I don't want to do all the time? Does my teen ever see me practice forms of self-care? And if it's if this is a time for parents to, kind of practice those, it's the perfect time. It's good for the teen and it's good for the parent.
To end the episode, you've advised parents to lessen pressures for their teens to be fixed or done with therapy.
Yes.
How can parents support a teen who has met their initial goals by encouraging maintain therapy? And what are long-term benefits of this as a continued resource?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking these questions. These are wonderful. So I oftentimes will work in my private practice with parents and teenagers where, let's say, again, like you said, the initial goals have been met and the crisis kind of been resolved. But what I usually recommend is continuing with therapy if possible, or continuing for the teen to have some sort of support, whether it's therapy, counseling, coaching, group work, mentorship, anything that's helpful. So there's a continued resource for them, because what, you know, doesn't happen is that, you finish therapy and then you're never anxious again, or there's never stress again. There's going to be events that, bring things up for the teenager. And it's helpful for them to have a place that they can go or a person that they can confide in. And in addition to that, it can also be a really good time to explore kind of the root of anxiety too, of like what's underneath the surface. So and not just, here are some coping skills and here are some effective ways to manage your anxiety, but maybe of what's really causing the anxiety, like what's underneath it. Maybe this is the time to really focus on building that self-worth and that self-esteem and really getting into the nitty-gritty here. So that's why I encourage parents to just maintain an openness for this, for their teen, that it's helpful, even if the initial crisis has been resolved.
As we wrap up, is there one key message or piece of advice that you would want our listeners to take away about destigmatizing mental health? What would that be?
I encourage parents and teenagers, adults, non-parents, everyone to never give up hope with this. So, I oftentimes will have parents that come to see me and they say, I've tried. I've tried having a conversation. I've tried sending my kid to therapy and it doesn't work. I'm I've lost hope. And I always remind people to be real and be authentic of, how challenging and hard it is, and honor those feelings and not to give up hope and to explore lots of different options and different avenues. Don't just have one conversation about anxiety with your teen and let it be the last. Don't, if your teen goes to one therapy session and is like, I don't like this, to be like, it's a lost cause forever. That there are lots of different resources. The time might not be right. The person might not be right. Um, there are lots of different pieces to it, but not to give up hope.
Sophia, how could people find you once again?
So my website, www.sophiagalano.com, and then Instagram, Sophia Vale _Galano. And then you can buy my book on Amazon, Penguin Random House, Barnes and Noble. Porchlight Books is a great website for bulk orders, and independent bookstores.
That book is called Calming Teenage Anxiety, a parent's guide to helping your teenager cope with worry. Honestly, great read. I'm super proud of you,
Thank
super proud
you.
for you, and I
Thank
wish you
you.
nothing but success. Anything
Thank
else that I didn't
you.
ask you?
I I think you covered most of the questions, but I will just say this was a lovely conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to read my book. And I hope that some of the listeners here get some practical tools and are feeling optimistic and inspired.
Wonderful. This was the Destigmatize Mental Health Podcast, Season 7, Episode 7. And this is Understanding Teenage Anxiety with Sophia Galano. You could share this episode and listen to past episodes of Destigmatize Mental Health Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Sophia, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you.
Thank you.